Alright folks, here we go with the notes for Chapter 1, the history of broadcast media. Now, these notes are going to be broken up into 3 different videos. This first video here is going to talk about the precursors of radio on up to the first commercial radio station. So, here we go. In 1844, Samuel Morse invented the telegraph, and it became the first almost instantaneous message sent across a long distance. Of course, Samuel Morse, also the inventor of Morse code, so the message that was sent was a bunch of dots and dashes instead of what we tend to think of as communication over lines today, but it was a way to be able to get a message from point A to point B. Fast forward to 1878, we get a little more familiar with what's going on with the telephone. Alexander Graham Bell delivering voice communication over that same line. So radio started as a point-to-point medium, much in the way that a telegraph or a telephone call would be. And that was until people discovered the advantages of using this technology for broadcasting, for one message reaching out to multiple people instead of just one. Part of what was able to make this happen was the theory of electromagnetic radiation. This was developed by James Maxwell and then proven by Heinrich Hertz. It's the concept of energy waves' ability to be able to travel through space. So we no longer need the wire, as this was able to be developed between the theory of Maxwell and then the proving of the theory by Mr. Hertz. Then we come to who we consider to be the grandfather of radio, Guillermo Marconi. He was the first to be able to send a radio signal more than a mile away. This started in 1896 when Marconi received a patent from Great Britain for his wireless telegraph service and was able to send that message out. And then he went across the ocean, 1901. He successfully sent Morse code across the Atlantic from the UK over to the United States. Radio waves were generated in this system by making a spark jump across a gap between 2 electrodes. So you kind of think about the way that an electrical system works to be able to close that circuit with those electrodes is how you not only are able to get electricity, but you're also able to send a radio wave. So the concepts are rather similar. 1906, Reginald Fessenden develops a high-speed alternator that could generate a continuous radio wave in 1906. And again, this is that idea of closing that circuit, but closing the circuit several times per second. So it almost seems like there's a continuous pattern going on with that wave. It's several mini connections, but they're all strung together so that we have what seems to us to be able to be a continuous radio wave. Then comes along Lee de Forest. He discovered that using a Fleming valve that had a small wire grid between the plate and the thin wire was going to be able to amplify or boost weak radio signals. So this was able to be able to make those audio signals much more louder, other than just what was happening with the acoustics of the systems in and of themselves. And this is what he called the audion. So the audion is what helped to provide amplification to the radio signals so that when the message was received, it was able to be heard much more loudly and much more powerfully. Now we're getting to where we have some legal tangles. Several companies developed their own versions of wireless telegraph systems. This also invited numerous lawsuits because, everybody's trying to get their thing to be the thing that everyone recognizes and everyone buys, and everyone thinks everyone else is stealing their ideas and all that sort of thing. Then we get to World War I, and the U.S. Navy takes over control of all radio operations in the United States, and in doing so, it equipped warships with radio and operated radio stations as a result, and it helped with the communications effort during World War I. Some of the impacts besides of that is that the Navy assumed consequences for patent infringement. So all those lawsuits that were going on, now the Navy is the one that any lawsuits would be directed to. The Navy then also asserted that such an important function of international radio communication should not be controlled by any particular company, that it's something that is much more necessary for the greater good of humanity, that it should not be completely dictated by one person or one group of people or one company. Enter the birth of RCA, the Radio Corporation of America. This was created by General Electric's buyout of American Marconi at the urging of the Navy and the U.S. government in 1919, just after the end of World War I. Agreements were made between RCA, GE, AT&T, and Westinghouse to share in the discoveries of each other. So we're starting to see now some more cooperation in the world of radio. This paves the way for broadcasting over point-to-point communication as the future of radio. And this becomes important for setting up the way that we think of radio today. And this really does pave the way for us looking at how we look at radio today. In 1920, Pittsburgh engineer Frank Conrad begins broadcasting from his garage. Westinghouse saw his popularity. Conrad worked for Westinghouse at the time, and Westinghouse gave him studios in their tallest building in Pittsburgh. And the station was licensed by the Department of Commerce as KDKA. And this station, which is still active today, is regarded as the first commercial radio station in the United States. The first broadcast of KDKA was the 1920 election results. And from there, various other broadcasts would happen over the airwaves of KDKA, including different types of interviews. The first church service was also broadcast on KDKA, and then other sorts of promotional things for Westinghouse went over these airwaves as well. Many other radio stations, many other cities start coming on board as well, and by the end of the 1920s, 1/2 of the homes in the United States had a working radio, and radio becomes a new way for listeners to be able to be informed and entertained. So that takes a look at the first section of our notes, and we'll start off with section 5 at the beginning of part B of this video. So make sure you check out that video to continue on with your notes.